When we think about the aging process, we mostly focus on the things we can readily see in the mirror.
Right, the obvious stuff like fine lines or, changes in skin elasticity.
Exactly. Or the way our hair might thin out. But there is this entirely hidden architecture in the body, this microscopic ecosystem that goes through its own really intense and often sudden aging process.
And then when that ecosystem crashes, it doesn't just change how you look. I mean, it fundamentally changes how you live.
Yeah, it impacts your comfort, your intimacy, just your overall quality of life.
It's a profound structural collapse. And because it happens entirely out of sight and, well, carries a certain societal taboo, millions of people just find themselves suffering through it in complete silence.
Which is heartbreaking. They just accept this deterioration as an inevitable part of getting older.
Yeah.
But welcome to this deep dive, because today our mission is to explore a fascinating, non-hormonal, regenerative frontier in women's intimate health.
It really is a game changer.
It is. So if you're familiar with the traditional ways the medical community treats menopausal and intimate health issues, you probably know the standard playbook.
Right. Hormone replacement therapy, HRT, or just, temporary over-the-counter lubricants.
Exactly. But today, we are unpacking the science behind something called polynucleotides. Specifically, how they're being used to reverse vulvovaginal atrophy and actually heal intimate tissues from the inside out.
This is a massive paradigm shift in gynecological health. We are moving entirely away from just masking symptoms.
Right, like just adding localized moisture.
Exactly. Or even temporarily replacing hormones that the body stopped producing. We're looking at actual localized cellular reprogramming.
Which brings me to the hook, because I have to tease this. The secret to this breakthrough involves DNA building blocks extracted from fish.
I know, it sounds totally wild on the surface.
Right, fish DNA. But it promises to do so much more than just moisturize. It's actively prompting human tissue to heal itself.
It might sound like science fiction, but this is grounded in incredibly robust cellular biology. I mean, it leans heavily on decades of successful clinical use in severe wound healing, regenerative dermatology, and even orthopedics.
Wow. And now that same technology is fundamentally changing how we approach the atrophic tissues of menopause.
Exactly.
But before we get into the cure, we really need to establish exactly what is breaking down in the body. Let's look at the biological landscape of vulvovaginal atrophy, or VVA.
Right, we have to understand the collapse first.
Exactly. So what is mechanically happening during peri and postmenopause that triggers this whole cascade?
Well, it comes down to a catastrophic drop in a specific systemic hormone. During your reproductive years, your estradiol levels naturally ebb and flow, but they hit pretty significant peaks.
Like how high are we talking?
Around 800 picograms per milliliter during a standard menstrual cycle.
Okay, 800.
But as a woman transitions through peri and postmenopause, those estradiol levels, they don't just gently taper off, they completely plummet.
Down to what?
Down to below 30 picograms per milliliter.
Wait, from 800 down to 30? That is, that's falling off a physiological cliff.
It's an immense systemic shock, and the vulvovaginal tissue is highly, highly dependent on that estrogen to maintain its physical structure.
Right, so what happens to the tissue when the estrogen is just gone?
When that hormone crashes, the vaginal epithelium, that's the surface lining, it thins out drastically. It flattens, and the tissue loses its papillae.
And papillae are those tiny structural projections, right?
Exactly. They give the tissue its elasticity and surface area. And concomitantly with that, you see a massive depletion of the collagen and elastin fibers in the deeper connective tissue.
Okay, let's unpack this. So for you listening, it's like a lush, highly hydrated garden suddenly losing its water supply and its topsoil all at once.
That's a great analogy.
Right. The ground doesn't just dry out. It gets structurally thin, fragile, and it just cracks under the slightest pressure.
And the biological fallout goes way beyond just structural integrity, because as that environment dries out, the healthy bacteria that live there start to die.
The lactobacilli.
Precisely. Those are crucial because they produce lactic acid, which keeps the vaginal pH in a healthy acidic range, usually around 4.0 to 4.5.
And when they die, the pH shifts rapidly.
Right.
It becomes much more alkaline.
Yes, which essentially rolls out the red carpet for bad bacteria and chronic inflammation.
Wow. So the clinical realities that stem from this structural and chemical collapse, they must be severe.
Oh, absolutely. Patients present with extreme dryness, intense itching, burning, and dyspareunia.
Which is severe pain during sex.
Right. And physicians also note significant petechia, that's microbleeding or pinpoint bruising during physical contact, because the tissue is just so incredibly fragile,
It's basically vulnerable to the slightest microtrauma.
to the point where even a routine exam or just wiping with toilet paper can cause tearing. And this actually brings up a really crucial specific application: chronic vulvodynia.
Oh, right, because that involves pain at the opening, right?
Exactly. Specifically, patients often develop these non-healing microfissures at the posterior commissure.
The posterior commissure, that's the bottom edge of the vaginal opening where it meets the perineum.
Yes, exactly. It's a high-tension area. And when the estrogen crashes, the tissue loses its mechanical strength. So you get these micro tears during any friction, but because the cellular scaffolding is starved, the fissures simply cannot heal.
So they just stay open and inflamed. That sounds agonizing.
It is. It creates a cycle of chronic, localized pain. And that's why finding a therapeutic rationale to treat those specific non-healing microfissures is so critical.
So if the root cause of all this physical suffering, the thinning, the fissures, is a lack of estrogen, how can a non-hormonal treatment actually fix the soil without replacing the water supply?
What's fascinating here is that while systemic estrogen is the traditional, well-documented fix, it simply isn't an option for everyone.
Right. There are major contraindications.
Exactly. Many women have a history of estrogen receptor-positive breast cancers, which completely rules out hormone replacement therapy. Or they just prefer not to use systemic hormones due to personal risk tolerance.
Which creates this massive need for a treatment that works on the structural level of the tissue itself.
Right, rebuilding the scaffolding and restoring hydration locally without touching systemic hormone levels.
So if we need a structural fix that isn't estrogen, what is the alternative? And this leads us directly to the core topic of the clinical data we're looking at today: polynucleotides, or PNs.
Yes, PNs. These are natural, biologically active molecules, essentially long, repeating chains of nucleotides, which are the fundamental biological building blocks of DNA and RNA.
Okay, but crucial detail here. The sources reveal these are highly purified and extracted primarily from the gonads of salmon and trout.
They are.
Okay, wait. I have to push back on this on behalf of the listener. We are putting fish DNA into human tissue. Doesn't the human body reject that, or at least have a mild freakout?
It's a totally logical fear, but the science of biocompatibility here is amazing.
Because my immune system attacks pollen, right? How does it not attack raw marine DNA?
First, the extraction process uses really advanced high-temperature sterilization. These molecules are entirely stripped of any proteins or peptides.
And proteins are usually what the immune system recognizes as an invader, right?
Exactly. When you remove them, you're left with raw, universal biological code.
But even without proteins, how does the body not recognize it as foreign?
Because of a metabolic mechanism called the salvage pathway, when these marine polynucleotides enter human tissue, human enzymes instantly start to cleave them.
Meaning they break them down.
Right. They break them down into much smaller nitrogen precursors, nucleosides, nucleotides, nitrogen bases. And because these are the fundamental building blocks of all life on Earth, they are entirely biocompatible.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's like taking a giant Lego castle, breaking it completely down into individual generic plastic bricks, and then handing a bucket of those bricks to the human body.
That is a perfect way to look at it. The body doesn't see a fish castle. It just sees a massive delivery of raw building materials.
That makes so much sense. So it isn't recognized as fish DNA by the body at all.
Not at all. It's just an abundant supply of the exact materials your cells desperately need.
Okay, so now we have the raw materials delivered to the cellular construction site. How does the body actually use them to fix the symptoms of VVA or close those stubborn fissures we talked about?
The clinical literature breaks down the mechanism of action into three distinct prongs.
Let's go through them.
The first is purely physical hydration. Polynucleotides are highly hydrophilic.
They attract water.
Exactly. They organize into a dense 3D gel in the tissue that binds water, providing persistent moisturizing and volume-increasing effects.
So it physically plumps the atrophic tissue, but it's not just like a surface lotion, right? It brings us to the second prong.
Right, the biological side. Fibroblast biostimulation. And this is the therapeutic rationale for healing those chronic microfissures in vulvodynia.
Oh, so?
Well, as the PNs are broken down, they bind to very specific cellular targets called purinergic A2 receptors. Think of these like ignition switches on your cells.
Okay, so the fragments hit the switch.
And it sends a massive wake-up call to your fibroblasts, which are the body's repair crew. They proliferate and start furiously pumping out new collagen, elastin, and extracellular matrix proteins.
Wow. So instead of just sitting there dormant because the estrogen is gone, they get manually turned back on to rebuild the structural scaffolding.
Exactly, which
Yeah.
gives that delicate posterior commissure the physical strength it needs to actually close and heal the microfissures.
That is incredible. And what's the third prong?
Angiogenesis.
Uh,
They promote the creation of new microblood vessels, which massively improves local circulation.
which means more oxygen and nutrients are naturally delivered to the area. Okay, let's unpack this for you listening. Using a standard over-the-counter lubricant is like splashing water on a dying plant.
Right, it evaporates quickly.
Exactly, the soil is still dead. But using polynucleotides is like hiring a landscaping crew to till the soil, plant new seeds, and install a permanent underground irrigation system.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is exactly why PNs are already so famous in dermatology and orthopedics. They trigger actual tissue regeneration, not just symptom masking.
Okay, so the biological theory is incredibly sound.
Hmm.
But does it actually relieve the suffering of women experiencing VVA in the real world?
Yes. Let's look at a real-world study from 2022 by Alessandri and colleagues.
Right. They tracked 54 postmenopausal women, right?
Yes, all suffering from severe VVA. They used a daily polynucleotide-based vaginal ovule for 2 to 4 weeks.
And they measured the results using the Vaginal Health Index, or VHI.
Exactly, which scores elasticity, secretions, pH, and moisture. The baseline scores for these women were terribly low, indicating severe atrophy.
But the post-treatment improvements were massive, weren't they?
Unbelievable. Vaginal hydration increased by nearly 60%, natural secretions by about 53%. And that superficial petechiae, the microbleeding, improved by over 51%.
So the tissue literally stopped tearing upon contact. That is huge.
And importantly, the formula also contained lactic acid.
Because, like we mentioned earlier, the good bacteria that usually make lactic acid had died off.
Exactly. So by adding lactic acid, it successfully lowered the vaginal pH back down to the healthy, acidic 4.0 to 4.5 range.
Which protects against bad bacteria and lets the healthy microbiome recover.
Precisely.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because it's not just ovules. The sources mention other studies using injections for more severe cases.
Yes. A pilot study by Angelucci and colleagues, they used a highly concentrated combination of polynucleotides and hyaluronic acid injected directly into the tissues.
So a localized in-office procedure.
Right, usually a few priming sessions to really kickstart that fibroblast activity,
Yeah.
especially for those stubborn cases of chronic vulvodynia with the non-healing microfissures.
And the results?
Yeah.
Because I know dyspareunia, the painful sex, is the biggest issue for so many.
It reduced dyspareunia by nearly 60% after just a few sessions. Women reported an over 80% improvement in sexual function.
We really, just from localized injections?
Yes, because they rebuilt the actual tissue integrity.
But I have to ask, with all this cellular activation, waking up fibroblasts, growing new blood vessels, what are the side effects? Are we risking, like, severe localized reactions?
The safety profile is actually excellent. Out of the 54 women in the ovule study, there were 0 spontaneous dropouts.
0. That's almost unheard of for uncomfortable gynecological treatments.
It really is. Now, some women did report transient mild burning or itching upon insertion, but it resolved spontaneously in just a few hours.
Which makes sense, right? You're putting an active hydrophilic gel into inflamed microtorn tissue.
Exactly. It's just the initial hydration process. And for the injections, the adverse reactions were just your typical mild injection site swelling or bruising.
Because the proteins are gone, so the allergy risk is incredibly low.
Right. It's highly effective with a very low barrier to entry for the patient.
Wow. So what does this all mean? We've really journeyed from the painful structural realities of vaginal atrophy, the estrogen crash, the tissue cracking, the microfissures, straight to the cutting edge of regenerative medicine.
It's a complete shift in how we handle women's health.
It is. We've seen how highly purified marine DNA fragments can fundamentally repair tissue, restore hydration, and stimulate collagen production, all without a single drop of added hormones.
By just handing the body the exact raw materials it needs.
Exactly. Women no longer have to choose between suffering in silence, relying on temporary lubricants, or using systemic hormones if they are contraindicated. There is a real structural alternative now.
It restores biological agency. The tissue isn't irrevocably dead, it's just starving for the right blueprint.
And that leaves you with a final, really provocative thought to mull over. If delivering the raw nucleotide building blocks of DNA can literally reprogram the local healing genes of vaginal tissue to reverse the physical signs of aging well, it makes you wonder.
What other inevitable degenerative conditions of human aging are simply waiting for the right cellular blueprint to be handed to them?